Imagine a land so vast it seems to touch the sky in every direction. This was the Mongolian steppe. Endless grass, rolling hills, a harsh, unforgiving climate. Winters were brutally cold, biting winds swept the frozen plains. Summers were short and hot, a brief window of life and growth. The people here were nomads, always on the move, searching for fresh pastures, for their herds of sheep, goats, horses. Homes were not fixed to the ground, portable felt tents called gurs. They were expert herders, reading the land and weather like no other. Their lives revolved around animals, which supplied milk for food and drink. The social fabric was kinship and loyalty. People lived in family groups, larger clans, tribes. Tribes often competed, fighting over grazing lands, water sources, stolen livestock. Instead, Khans rose by their ability to attract followers, win battles, provide for their people. Yet the steppes were not cut off from great civilizations. To the south lay China. The nomads traded, exchanging horses, furs, leather for grain, silk, metal goods. When trade failed, tribes banded together to raid settled lands and take what they needed. Into this harsh world, a boy named Temujin was born around 1162. Legend says he came clutching a blood clot, a sign of a great warrior. This tension was about to be reshaped by the birth of one extraordinary boy. Into this harsh and turbulent world, a boy named Temujin was born. His father, Yasuge, was a minor chieftain who sought to secure his son's future through marriage. When Temujin was 9, his father took him to live with his future bride's family. On the return journey, Yasuge was poisoned by a rival Tatar tribe. He died, leaving his family leaderless and vulnerable. When the news reached his clan, they abandoned his widow and children. They survived by foraging for roots, fishing, living in extreme poverty. This experience taught Temujin the bitter taste of betrayal and the fragility of power. As he grew, his family's rivals saw him as a potential threat. He was hunted down, captured and enslaved by the very clan that had abandoned him. He was forced to wear a wooden collar, a moment of ultimate humiliation. Yet even in this desperate situation, Temujin's spirit was not broken. He watched, he listened, and he waited for his chance. With help from a sympathetic guard, he escaped under cover of darkness, a daring act that demonstrated his courage and resourcefulness. These early years of suffering were the crucible that forged the man who would become Genghis Khan. He learned not to trust blindly, to rely on his own strength, to value loyalty above all else. He saw how constant infighting made the Mongol tribes weak and vulnerable. These experiences planted the idea of uniting all tribes under a single banner. The abandoned boy was slowly becoming a leader. After escaping captivity, Temujin set out to reclaim his life and build his own following. His first step was to find his promised bride, Borta. They were married, creating a crucial political alliance. Shortly after, disaster struck. The Merkits raided their camp and kidnapped Borte in revenge. This was a direct challenge he could not ignore. He sought help from his father's sworn brother Togrul Khan and his childhood friend Jamuka. Together, they assembled a large army and launched a surprise attack. The battle was a resounding success. They crushed the Merkits and rescued Borta. This victory dramatically increased Temujin's reputation as a capable military leader. Warriors began to flock to his banner, drawn by his charisma and growing fame. He organized his people in a new way, promoting based on skill, merit, and loyalty to him personally. This was a revolutionary idea on the steppes. This brought him into conflict with Jamuka, who believed in the old aristocratic order. The two friends became bitter rivals, splitting the Mongols into opposing camps. A long and difficult civil war ensued, a struggle for the soul of the Mongol people. Temujin's superior organization and strategy prevailed. He defeated Jamuka. By 1206, he had brought all warring tribes under his single rule. In a great assembly, the chieftains proclaimed him Genghis Khan, the universal ruler of all the people of the felt-walled tents. A new nation was born. With the title of Genghis Khan, Temujin was now sovereign of a unified Mongol nation. He declared that all conquered tribes were now Mongols: Tatar, Karit, Naiman, Merkit. From now on, they were all one people, united under his rule. He reorganized society along military lines, dividing the population into units of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. Every able-bodied man was a soldier, and his family was part of his military unit. A man's primary allegiance was to his decimal commander, and ultimately, to Genghis Khan himself. The system made mobilization incredibly fast and efficient. Genghis Khan created a written code of law known as the Yasa. The Yasa established strict rules for every aspect of Mongol life. It promoted religious tolerance, granting freedom of worship to all. Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Taoism. It established the rule of law as supreme, binding even the Khan himself. He created the infrastructure necessary for a unified state, building the Yam communication network. He adopted the Uyghur script and created a written Mongol language. This allowed him to send decrees, record laws, and manage administration efficiently. He was building more than just an army. He was building a state, forging a common identity, reorganizing society, establishing a unified legal code, creating a written language. Genghis Khan transformed the chaotic steppes into a disciplined nation, poised to expand far beyond its borders. The Mongol army was unlike any other the world had ever seen. It was composed entirely of cavalry. Every Mongol man was a superb horseman. The Mongol horse was small, sturdy, incredibly resilient. Each warrior kept several horses, switching mounts during long marches, giving unparalleled speed and endurance. They could appear as if from nowhere, strike with lightning speed. Discipline and coordination were the cornerstones of Mongol military success. They used signals to communicate complex maneuvers across the battlefield. One of their most feared tactics was the feigned retreat. A unit would pretend defeat, luring the enemy into a chase. Once the enemy formation was broken and stretched, the fleeing Mongols would turn back while hidden units emerged from the flanks, encircling and annihilating the disorganized foe. This required incredible discipline and timing. The Mongols were masters of psychological warfare. Before attacking, they often offered terms of surrender. If the city submitted, people were spared. If a city resisted, they laid siege using captured engineers to build siege engines. Once a city fell, they carried out terrifying massacres, leaving survivors to spread tales of horror. They built success on adapting and learning, capturing engineers from China and Persia. They quickly mastered siege weapons, turning enemies' technology against them. They combined steppe tactics of speed and archery with sophisticated siegecraft. This created a force that was adaptable, relentless, and seemingly invincible. A true storm on horseback. Once Genghis Khan had united the Mongol tribes, he turned his war machine outward. The first major target was the Tangut kingdom of Xixia in northwestern China. After a series of campaigns, Xixia was forced to become a vassal state. Next, Genghis Khan set his sights on the larger, wealthier Jin Empire in northern China. The war against the Jin was long and brutal. The Mongols faced massive armies and heavily fortified cities. They learned siege tactics, broke through the Great Wall, and sacked Zhongdu in 1215. The westward expansion was sparked by a diplomatic incident. Genghis Khan sent a trade caravan to the Khwarezmian Empire. The governor of Otrar attacked the caravan, merchants were killed, goods seized. When Genghis Khan sent envoys demanding justice, the Shah executed an envoy. Enraged, Genghis Khan unleashed the full might of his army. Between 1219 and 1221, the Mongols dismantled Khwarezm with strategic efficiency. Samarkand, Bukhara, Urgench, centers of Islamic learning destroyed, irrigation systems destroyed, fertile farmland turned to desert. The scale of destruction was unprecedented, a message about the price of defying the Mongols. After Genghis Khan's death, his sons continued the conquests. Ogadai launched a massive invasion of Europe. Subutai's armies swept across Russia, Poland, Hungary, reaching the outskirts of Vienna. In the east, Kublai Khan completed the conquest of China, establishing the Yuan dynasty. At its peak, the Mongol Empire was the largest contiguous land empire in history. Conquering a vast empire was one thing. Ruling it was another challenge entirely. The Mongols now governed a massive and diverse population of settled peoples, different cultures, religions, languages. The legal foundation remained the Yasa, the law code of Genghis Khan. A key innovation was the Yam, an efficient communication and transportation network. A rider could gallop station to station, change to a fresh horse and continue without delay. Messages could travel up to 200 miles a day. The Yam let the Great Khan send decrees, receive reports, and move troops fast. Mongol administration was pragmatic and adaptable. They recruited educated officials from conquered populations. In Persia, Persian administrators. In China, Chinese and other foreign officials. These bureaucrats collected taxes, kept records, and managed local affairs. But this created a clear distinction. Mongols formed a military aristocracy, living apart and enjoying privileges. They were exempt from taxes and held key power positions. They employed locals but retained ultimate control. This created efficient, secure government, yet rulers were seen as foreign conquerors. That separation later helped fragment the empire as regional Mongol rulers adopted local cultures and grew distant from their homeland. The vast empire was held together by efficient administration, but the seeds of its eventual fragmentation were already planted in its very structure. The Mongol conquests were destructive, but once fighting stopped, a single power brought unprecedented peace. This era is called the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace. For the first time, travelers could cross Eurasia safely. It was said a maiden with gold could wander the empire unharmed. Security revitalized the Silk Road. Trade that had been risky now flourished under Mongol protection. Merchants, diplomats, missionaries carried goods, ideas, and cultures. Chinese silk, porcelain, gunpowder, Persian astronomy, medicine, art. The Mongols were connectors more than inventors. They created the first great era of globalization. European merchants like Marco Polo traveled to China and returned with tales and new products. Gunpowder reached Europe and later revolutionized warfare. Magnetic compass, block printing, playing cards, noodles all spread along these routes. But there was a dark side. The same routes that moved goods also moved disease. In the 1340s, the Black Death began in Central Asia. It traveled with merchants and armies via the Yam system and the Silk Road, reached the Black Sea, then entered Europe on Genoese ships. The plague killed about 1/3 of Europe's population and caused huge upheaval. This pandemic was an unintended consequence of the Mongol-connected world. Pax Mongolica brought unprecedented connection and catastrophic disease. The complex legacy of the